Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We know there is a lot going on today, and so we are glad that you have come to hopefully be informed and be better educated when you vote. First and foremost, I would like you to be informed that the Fund for Santa Barbara has provided funds for translation services.
Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. Si necesitan interpretación, me llamo Samuel Duarte y vamos a tener el equipo de interpretación ahí afuera. If anyone needs interpretation, my name is Samuel Duarte and I'll have the equipment right outside where that table is. Nomás una regla, que si necesito que hablen más alto, les voy a hacer la señal así. Y entonces, if I need you to speak a little bit louder, if you're asking a question, I'm going to ask you to please raise your voice with a sign like this, okay? So muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Hasta luego.
What I would like to do is to go over the format for this morning's presentations. It is a format that all four of our participants have agreed to. Initially, we will have a brief introduction about what the League is all about. Then each speaker will have 10 minutes each to present their information. Presently, they are seated in alphabetical order, but during the presentation, we will be alternating the proponents with the opponents. So Katie Davis will be speaker first, followed by Beth Marino. Linda Krop will be third, and then Bob Poole will be last. Each of those participants will have 10 minutes. That will be about 40 minutes. We will then take a 10-minute break, during which time we will be collecting cards, your questions. I do have to emphasize, and I know most of you are aware of this, the only questions that we entertain are those that are written on these cards. There are no verbal oral questions taken from the audience. They are only the written questions will be considered. After a 10-minute break, then we will have about an hour devoted for question and answers, and each participant who would like to answer the question will be given a maximum of 2 minutes to answer or respond. Then we will have closing arguments from each speaker, no more than 2 minutes each. I would just like to let you be aware of what the League of Women Voters is all about. We are a nonpartisan organization interested in encouraging informed participation of all citizens in government works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy and advocacy. So it's under that umbrella that we are hosting today. Again, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for abiding by the format that we have established for today. And I again just would like to remind you, please no applause and please no calling out. So with that, we will get started. We will first start with Katie Davis. By the way, Jennifer Dolan, who is up here, a League member, is our timer. Alrighty, so thank you, Katie. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, so sounds good. I'm Katie Davis. I grew up here in Santa Barbara County, and I'm volunteering with the Yes on Measure P campaign because I care deeply about Santa Barbara County and my children's future. I feel like this is the most important thing I can be doing right now. Until recently, I was vice president at a local tech company. Interestingly, just that one tech company employs more people and at better wages than the entire oil industry in Santa Barbara County, which is interesting. So I am happy to talk about jobs and economic growth. I can tell you there are people interested in doing tech businesses in the North County. For instance, I have a friend who is creating a software company for the wine and agriculture industry. He's starting a company here because this is where he wants to live, and he can attract engineers and others because it is a desirable place to work and live. But if this place is surrounded by thousands of oil wells, it becomes less attractive to other businesses. That's why he's strongly supporting Measure P, because he knows that it would harm tourism, The oil industry will call the shots, and you won't see growth in clean energy, in good, safe, long-term jobs. Counties with more extreme oil extraction have higher unemployment, like Kern County, for example, which has 30 times more oil production than Santa Barbara County, but their unemployment is higher than Santa Maria. It's higher than Lompoc. That is not the answer. In other areas where communities have opened themselves up to extreme oil extraction, it has hurt property values. People can have trouble getting loans and mortgages and insurance near these kinds of operations. Some of our volunteers were walking in Mission Hills recently on a street called Calle Lindero. An oil company, Freeport-McMoRan, has an oil operation going on near there. And one family told us, the fumes are so bad, my kids have to come in the house because their eyes burn, their throat burns, they can't play outside. Another told us the noise from the pumping is constant all night. We can't sleep, it's so loud. He said his neighbor moved away to Santa Maria and their kids had been sick, and then they moved away, and she said they weren't having those problems anymore. That company, Freeport-McMoRan, immediately ponied up over $400,000 to defeat Measure P. Right now, they are drilling test wells right above the Lompoc aquifer that provides 100% of water, all of the drinking water, for Lompoc, Mission Hills, and Vandenberg Village. The Vandenberg Village Services District recently appealed that project because of concerns about potential for water contamination. But it's going forward. They're right to be worried. Freeport-McMoRan is best known for owning the largest gold and copper mine in the world in Indonesia, which has sent 1 billion tons of waste downriver. You think you can trust these guys? Really? You want to hand the keys to the county to them? I could also tell you about a farmer, Fred Starr, in Kern County, who was near an oil operation. The wastewater from that steam injection field leached into the ground and polluted his well water. His entire almond orchard died. He eventually won an $8.5 million settlement, but that can't compensate him for the loss of his water supply. Once you contaminate your groundwater, you can't get it back. This is relevant because that same company that he sued, ERA, has just applied for 200 new wells here in Santa Barbara County to do the same kind of operation. Imagine our beautiful hills around here covered in hundreds of new oil wells. Now imagine thousands of wells, because the Wall Street Journal reported that $665 million was invested in Texas-based ERG by a Chinese company to ramp up production in Santa Barbara County. They could have thousands of wells planned. Santa Maria Energy says they have plans for over 7,000 wells. The oil industry is trying to pretend that this measure, Measure P, is about current oil production because they don't want to talk about what it's really about, which is a ban on future wells, future expansion, using specific extreme techniques like fracking, acidizing, and steam injection. While it's true these techniques have been around in primitive form for decades, recent advances have increased their use and the risks they pose to our environment. Fracking involves injections of water and chemicals to break up the rock. Acidizing uses a similar mix but adds hydrofluoric acid to dissolve the rock to extract oil. And hydrofluoric acid is one of the most toxic chemicals in industrial use. If you splash some of that on yourself, you will die. It's bad stuff. Steam injection uses immense heat and high pressure, which can cause well casings or bedrock to fracture. It has a high well casing failure rate. In Canada, use of steam injection, same process, has polluted an entire aquifer and lake. They're using this process in the tar sands. These new techniques use a tremendous amount of water, and they risk contaminating our water supply. This has happened elsewhere. Towns have lost their water. They have to truck it in or pipe it in or leave. These techniques involve toxic chemicals that cause cancer, birth defects, and other health impacts. Some of these processes are exempt from the Safe Drinking Water Act. They're not well regulated. It is worth noting that the president of the Consumer Water Board, the California Water Impact Network, the California Nurses Association, and many farmers and vintners have strongly endorsed Measure P because of these concerns. The drought is already hurting farmers and ranchers and communities across Santa Barbara County, and we have no idea how long it will last. Ranchers have been forced to sell off their herds, communities are rationing water. Some oil companies have been cheering the fact that they're not using groundwater, but reclaimed gray water. But with proper treatment and ever-improving technologies, reclaimed water can be used for irrigation and other freshwater needs. Even if a project is using wastewater, it is actually wasting water, something we cannot afford to do now. This polluted wastewater that comes back with the oil that is produced is permanently polluted with toxic chemicals and naturally occurring toxins, hydrogen sulfide, radioactive compounds, arsenic, lead, and other contaminants. To dispose of this highly polluted water, they re-inject it underground. But this is a process that has been proven to trigger earthquakes. The U.S. Geological Survey has found definitively that the more than fourfold increase in large earthquakes in the central and eastern U.S. coincides with the injection of wastewater from oil and gas production. Santa Barbara County is riddled with fault lines. We can't afford to take this kind of risk. These processes are also the most energy and carbon intensive in the world. They hurt the environment and they make climate change worse. Measure P protects the approximately 1,000 current oil wells in the county, but it would prevent over 10,000 new wells using ever more extreme and risky techniques. Measure P may be your only way to head off this increase. Current oil production would continue. No jobs are impacted. No county revenue is impacted. Oil is a small part of our economy, less than 1%. It's actually only 0.6 or 0.7% of county revenue, of our county budget, and it's not impacted. This would not affect county services or county revenue. But these extreme techniques would put the other 99% of our economy in tourism, in agriculture, in tech at risk. We must keep this area safe, clean, healthy, and a desirable place to work and live. We cannot afford to pollute our limited water supplies or risk triggering a major earthquake to get the last drop of oil out of the ground. What's more, climate change is real. It is happening now. Scientists have made a connection to this drought and to increases in deadly wildfires in California. In Santa Barbara County, we need to build the clean energy economy of the future, not double down on the most polluting heavy oil supplies in the world, which is what we have here in Santa Barbara County, what's left. Please do not believe the millions of dollars Freeport-McMoRan, Chevron, and outside oil investors are spending to defeat this measure and influence our local election. I know you will see lots of signs and ads, but this just shows the degree they want to ramp up use of these techniques. So please think of that. They will destroy this area and they'll take their profits and we will be left with a mess. Please vote yes on Measure P in November. It may be your only opportunity to protect your water, your air, your health, and your safety. Please vote yes on Measure P. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Before we hear from Beth, we have been asked to remind you that the only liquids that are able to be consumed in here are those that are in bottles. So bottled water, everything else, food, etc. is not allowed. Thank you so much. Okay, Beth Marino, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you to the League for sponsoring this forum and providing the important contributions to the voting process. My name is Beth Marino. I'm the Vice President of Legal and Corporate Affairs for Santa Maria Energy. I've worked for the company for the past 10 years, first as outside general counsel, and then I came in-house as general counsel in 2011. Better? I am immensely proud of the work we do at Santa Maria Energy and the efforts we take to safely and responsibly produce a resource that every one of us in this room uses on a daily basis. Prior to joining Santa Maria Energy, I was a partner with Andre Morris & Buttery, one of the preeminent law firms on the Central Coast, where my practice focused upon advising businesses on general corporate, employment, and real property matters. Leaving Andre Morris & Buttery and joining Santa Maria Energy was not a decision I made lightly. I'm a lawyer after all, and all decisions take a lot of weighing of pros and cons. But after working with the inspiring people who had the idea to start the company and getting to know the dedicated and hardworking employees, I was easily won over. You see, at Santa Maria Energy, we strive to always do the right thing and be a positive contributor to the community in which we live and work. That is why we have won the Clean Lease Award 3 times in the past 5 years. That is why we created Learn on our website, where members of the public can ask questions and we provide answers. That is why we offer seminars called Petroleum 101, where you can learn about what we do. That is why we open our oil field to members of the public for tours. And if you hadn't had the opportunity to do that yet, you'll be amazed at how tech the fields have become and how our operations gently rest upon the land. That is why I joined Santa Maria Energy, in addition to the people, many of whom are here today. Just a couple of more notes about me. I've been practicing law for about 17 years. I grew up in Massachusetts, went to the University of Colorado at Boulder for undergraduate. I went to law school at University of San Diego Law, where I met my husband. He is a prosecutor for the DA's office, and we have 2 young boys, ages 10 and 12. We moved to the Central Coast when my oldest was 5 months old because we wanted a place where they could be safe. And I'm going to apologize now because you will probably see me at noon running out of here to go to my car because I really want to be on the sidelines to watch my little guy play soccer at 12:30. So perhaps we should get down to business. I mentioned that many of my coworkers are here today, and this is because our livelihoods are at stake with this election. Measure P is drastic, flawed, and costly. And it will mean the end of Santa Maria Energy, the company we are so proud to work for, and so many other companies like us throughout the county. Measure P is drastic because it shuts down an entire industry. And it does so even though we have a robust and extremely comprehensive regulatory process that ensures all projects are developed in the most environmentally sensitive way. In fact, Santa Barbara County is known to have the strictest regulations in the world. If you listen to the proponents, you would think there is no regulatory framework for oil projects in place. It's simply not true. Let's take the Santa Maria Energy Project, for example. As you may have heard, almost 1 year ago, in November 2013, we received approval for a project in the Orpet oil field, a 100-year-old operating oil field. This project would use cyclic steam, which is one of the banned activities under Measure P. Let me take a moment here to say emphatically that cyclic steam injection is not fracking. It is not hydraulic fracturing. The water we use to make steam is non-potable recycled wastewater, and no chemicals are used in the process. And this same process has been used safely and responsibly for over 50 years in this county. The approval for this project came after a 2-year process in which each and every environmental impact of the project was thoroughly reviewed by the county and its consultants. An 1,100-page environmental impact report was released to the public for review and comment. And if you happen to have been reading the papers during that time, then you know that every single molecule of greenhouse gas, air emissions were quantified. Sensitive habitat was counted acre by acre. And it's important to know that this process is entirely discretionary, meaning after 2 years of review, the county had the right to say yes, no, or change it. Each and every oil project developed in this county must go through that very same process. And the county is not the only one who reviews us or monitors our operations. We also need permits from the Air Pollution Control District, Division of Oil and Gas, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the United States Service Fish and Wildlife, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the Petroleum Department, and on and on. As I said, the process is robust and very comprehensive and discretionary. We do not need a ban. Bad projects can be denied, and good projects like SME project can go forward. This is the democratic way. Measure P is also flawed. It is flawed because regardless of what the proponents say now, we are stuck with the language as it is written in the initiative. As written, it will shut down all existing production and put an end to the industry within 5 years. What I think is not understood, or if I was cynical, perhaps it's understood too well, an oil field is a dynamic place which requires ongoing discretionary permits to continue operating. Measure P would shut down existing operations that use the same safe production techniques that have been used for decades in this county. Proponents will tell you the initiative grants existing oil operations an exemption to continue operating. But please, someone tell me where those words are in the initiative. They also say that well maintenance is excluded from the ban. But again, those words are not mentioned in the initiative. They talk about vested rights, but under California law, vested rights only apply when an operation has all the necessary discretionary permits. An oil field is like an ongoing construction project. And to operate, discretionary permits are constantly needed. They are needed for maintenance and repairs, to replace worn-out equipment, and to construct supporting facilities. Measure P will prohibit the county from issuing these permits for existing operations, and a slow death will occur. I mentioned that we received approval for our project, a project that, funny enough, a colleague from Ms. Krop's office called a model project and asked for it to be approved. Last November, after a 2-year environmental review, a 1,100-page EIR, and did I mention $2 million in costs, but we are still waiting for our permits to commence the project. This means, under the language of the initiative, we will not be considered to have a vested right to develop our project. And if Measure P passes, we will have to shut down. We will lose our jobs. These are good-paying head-of-household jobs. And this does not even include the impact to our vendors, our suppliers, our contractors. So I take real issue when the proponents say existing jobs will not be affected. In addition to being drastic and flawed, Measure P will be costly for this county. This county's lead attorney, Mike Gazzoni, has said that Measure P will create the biggest legal exposure in county history, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Measure P will create claims against the county for regulatory takings. A taking is where the government takes away someone's property without just compensation. Doesn't just have to be a physical taking of property, it can be a regulatory taking where a regulation is enacted that prevents you from doing something with your property. In the case of Measure P, it'll prevent owners and operators from developing their mineral rights. And I'm not just talking about oil companies, but thousands of mineral owners who depend on our money to live. According to the National Association of Royalty Owners, a majority of mineral owners are women over 65 who depend on royalty as their sole source of income. I know we have owners here today who can tell you how important those are to them. For Santa Maria Energy, we are not big oil, but a small company of 30 employees, hoping to be more, owned by individuals who live and work in your community. We are your neighbors. Finally, this measure puts the county board in a very difficult position of becoming the judge and the jury for these very complicated constitutional claims. Is this really where we want them to spend their time? And the only way to change this mess, if Measure P passes, would be another costly initiative process. Neither the supervisors nor county staff can change what is written. There is no other way to say it. Measure P is drastic, flawed, and costly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Linda Krop.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you for having me here today. I'm the Chief Counsel of the Environmental Defense Center, which provides services in Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Ventura counties. We've been around since 1977, and we have a long history of working on local oil, gas, and other energy issues. And we recently were very proud to support the Cuyama Solar Project. The purpose of my talk this morning is to clarify what Measure P does and doesn't do, and to respond to the many misstatements that have been made regarding the measure. Our role with respect to Measure P is that we did work with the authors, we understand what the intention was, we understand what the legal consequences are, and I want to dispel some of the myths today. So first of all, what does Measure P do? Measure P prohibits land uses that support new, high-intensity petroleum operations in Santa Barbara County. These include fracking, acidizing, and steam injection. What projects does Measure P apply to? Measure P only applies to new, high-intensity petroleum operations. It does not apply to existing projects, even if they apply high-intensity techniques. Measure P does not apply to conventional oil and gas drilling. So even new projects that use conventional oil and gas drilling techniques can be approved and go forward. Measure P does not apply to projects that are vested, meaning they have their approvals and construction has begun, so even if the project isn't completed and operational, it's still allowed to go forward. Measure P does not apply to a project if it will result in a taking of private property, meaning that it would deprive the property owner of all or substantially all uses of their property. I want to now talk about the exemptions in Measure P. So beyond what's allowed, as I mentioned, there are further allowances for exemptions to be fair. If a project is denied and the denial would result in a taking of private property, the applicant can apply for an exemption from Measure P. In fact, right now, the county is considering an ordinance, which will be heard by the Board of Supervisors next Tuesday, to provide a county process for reviewing and considering applications for these types of exemptions. If a project is vested, as I mentioned, there's no need to even come in and apply for an exemption because Measure P does not apply. You simply proceed with your project. County Council has confirmed that on more than one occasion, that if an operator thinks they have a right to proceed, they have their approvals, they're either already operating or they've begun construction for their project, they can proceed. They don't need to even come in for an exemption. However, if an operator wants to modify its operations and commence new high-intensity petroleum operations on an existing operation, then yes, they do have to come in and apply for either vested rights or takings exemption. Does Measure P apply to well maintenance? This is one of the most frequently misstatements that we hear regarding Measure P, and the answer is simply and unequivocally no. Well maintenance does not fit within the definition of high-intensity petroleum operations, and the authors of Measure P use the county's existing definitions, existing zoning ordinances, existing petroleum code. Well maintenance is defined by the county as well servicing, not any of the definitions that are covered by Measure P. Notwithstanding that clarity, opponents of Measure P often cite to a report prepared by county staff to support their contention that Measure P will ban existing operations. However, that report was incorrect in that it equated the types of operations that are banned by Measure P with well maintenance. And because of that incorrect statement and that mistake, the Board of Supervisors voted not to accept that report. And if you go on the county's website, you will see this statement that is on the county's website accompanying that report that says, as reflected in the minutes of the public hearing of June 13th, 2014, the Board of Supervisors declined to accept the impact report on the initiative to ban high-intensity petroleum pursuant to Elections Code Section 9111. That was the reason that report was not accepted by the board. The subsequent analyses prepared by the county. The impartial analysis prepared by the county council and the analysis prepared by the auditor confirm that well maintenance is not covered by Measure P. Will existing operations eventually be shut down by Measure P? And the answer again is no. Any new regulation only applies to future projects and cannot apply to operations that are currently legal and permitted. If such operations are subject to changes in the future, so long as those changes or additional approvals that were mentioned support the same legal uses, Measure P will not apply. Again, Measure P does not apply to existing operations, and it doesn't apply to even new conventional operations. Measure P will only apply if future changes result in new high-intensity petroleum operations. The fiscal impact statement prepared by the county auditor confirms that Measure P does not affect existing operations by pointing out that any fiscal impact, such as a reduction in property taxes, will only happen over time as minerals deplete. The report also points out that revenues could actually go up if new oil and gas reserves are discovered and are extracted using primary recovery methods. This is from the county auditor. Thus, this report by the auditor confirms that number one, existing operations won't be shut down, and two, even new conventional oil and gas production methods are allowed. The auditor also pointed out that the eventual potential decrease in oil and gas processing will actually benefit the county by lowering the risk of potential fiscal costs related to any environmental damage from the oil and gas extraction process. The next thing we hear is that Measure P will result in costly litigation for the county because of a lot of new lawsuits relating to takings claims. However, the county is developing an ordinance, again, that will be heard next Tuesday, that would provide a process for an operator to come through the county process, not run to court, to say that a denial of their project for future high-intensity petroleum operations would constitute a taking. The county will review the evidence, and if the claim is legitimate, then the county will grant an exemption, and there's no need to go to court. Finally, will Measure P cost the county jobs and money? No, again, because it doesn't apply to existing operations. Therefore, no existing jobs or revenue will be affected. Nor will it apply to future conventional oil and gas drilling projects, so there could be even new jobs and revenue, as the auditor pointed out. And finally, as also noted by the auditor, the county may actually save money by not having to respond to environmental damage caused by high-risk oil and gas development operations. It should be noted that unlike other oil-producing regions, Santa Barbara County does not have an oil extraction tax to cover these costs, including road damage caused by heavy trucks and machinery, emergency response, and toxic spills. As we've learned from many past spills, these costs can be extremely high, even catastrophic. For all these reasons, we hope that you will do your research, get the facts. I know that the industry is spending millions of dollars, way outspending the proponents, to spread these lies and untruths. It's very important to know what Measure P does and doesn't do, and to please consider the facts and please support Measure P. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Krop. Our fourth speaker is Bob Poole.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the League, and I'd like to thank all of you who are giving up cartoons this morning to come here and listen to us. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I think I know most everyone in the room. I've been in this community since 1975. I went to Allen Hancock, I went to UCSB, to the Gauchos, and then I got a master's in environmental science from the University of Maryland. So I guess someone said to me the other day, since I went to UCSB and then University of Maryland, and the Maryland mascot is the Terrapins, and we all know that UCSB is the Gauchos, so that think of me as a gaucho riding a sea turtle. I'm here, Beth and I are here today, obviously, because we care about the planet. We care about the environment. We care about our economy. The dehumanizing and demonizing that goes on, the inconvenient truths that are ignored about this issue, they motivate me. I've been working in this industry since 2002. Before that, I ran the Goleta Chamber of Commerce. I've been involved. Linda and I have been working together, so to speak, for a long time. We've been collaborative, and I think that's the central point that I want to get back to at the end, is, what we really need to do is not make rules by jumping over our representative process. We need to sit down and look at the realities of what our energy is, what our challenges are, and we need to base our decision making on facts. And so I'd like to start by sharing some things and add to my contribution here. As I mentioned, we're taking time away from our families. Beth, if she doesn't get out of here, she's going to miss a soccer game. I usually have a call on Saturday morning with my granddaughter, FaceTime. I had to postpone that. That's fine, but I'm a real person. I've got family. I've got 3 kids. My kids grew up in Lompoc. They were born there. I went to high school here, all of that. But what motivates me is, I want to share the verifiable facts, not the inconvenient truths that you're hearing, that if you will, and very real negative consequences of Measure P. And we're doing this on behalf of a broad coalition. This isn't big oil. You know who big oil is? Big oil are countries whose names we don't like. Russia and Iraq. They supply California with over 20% of the oil we use here. Saudi Arabia ships in 30%. We import over 60% of our oil into California every day, between 1 million and 1.3 million barrels. Every day over the ocean on super tankers. That's the reality. Now, we're doing this on behalf of our coalition because we believe those of you who haven't made up your mind about Measure P, and those of you who are just now starting to rethink this drastic, flawed, and costly attempt to force both an environmental and economic train wreck on all of us. And I'll explain all of that. A train wreck that will have devastating effects on real families, our families, in real ways. And I'd like to speak about those impacts on real families. Last week I had the opportunity to participate in a forum here. You might have read about it in the paper, Committee Inc. sponsored forum. And in the Q&A, at the end of the Q&A, a young woman, a young mother whose husband works in the oil industry, a family, she stood up and she asked the Yes on P proponent, what are we going to do? My family, we're going to lose our job. What are we going to do? Do we have to move away? And it was just very striking to me because the proponent of Measure P didn't have a good answer, but it just along the way to this nirvana where we're flying around in solar airplanes, that there's going to be some casualties. Well, no, these are real people, real jobs. And you've heard said over and over again, it's just 1%, 200 jobs, something like that. That's just not true. According to UCSB economic study, the Sterling UCSB, totally objective study, almost 2,000 jobs, direct, indirect, and induced jobs, high-paying jobs. So what about those? We just gloss over and then we talk about tourism. Tourism's a great industry. Agriculture's a great industry. I know a little bit about tourism, having run the Goleta Chamber of Commerce and before that the Solvang Chamber of Commerce. Tourism is a vital industry, but the jobs in tourism, not near what they pay in the oil industry. You can't raise a family on. And by the way, the tourism, this is held up as being one of the panacea industries that's going to take us into the future. Well, transportation emissions account for over half of the greenhouse gas emissions coming into this county. And guess what tourism does? It brings more cars here. So there are all these inconvenient truths that are failed to be mentioned that I'd really like for all of you to think about as we go forward making decisions about this issue. Now, you've heard a lot about what if the sky falls, what if this. We talk about Cold Lake up in Canada. There was a minor spill in a process. It was cleaned up. The poster that they show around, that's from a natural seep. Off the coast of California, we have natural seeps, 100 to 150 barrels of oil seep out every day, 1 million metric cubic feet of methane. That's a greenhouse gas multiplier 21 times. That can be corrected. That's a natural seep. I think we need to focus on what is, not what if. And because of that, what we're voting on is Measure P. And what Measure P is, as I said, is a train wreck, a complete shutdown. And we'll talk about that. I'll give you some reasons. I appreciate Ms. Krop with her legal basis to try to justify this, but I'll give you a real simple understanding of why everything she's saying about existing shutdowns is just not true. And then I'd like to share with you some real folks who've read this train wreck, and I encourage you to read all 21 pages of it. Dr. Peter Naylor, professor of economics, Santa Barbara City College. You might have seen him on the commercial, talking about the real impacts of this. Dr. Jim Bowles, professor of geology, UCSB. The Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department, deputy sheriffs, the firefighters, they're endorsing no on P. Why? Santa Barbara County Agricultural Advisory Board, the Farm Bureau, the Cattlemen's Association. Richard Russell, third generation rancher here, farmer, he is. Ricardo Magni, a lot of you know Ricardo. 2012 Santa Barbara County Teacher of the Year over here at Pioneer High School. He's read it, and the list goes on. Our No on P coalition is not big oil. It's people like that. It's people like us. We're going to lose our job. It's other people who supply things for us. It's the people in the restaurants who serve the meals that we will go out and eat. It's those people. Those are those 2,000 jobs. Let's put a face on it. Now, what we support, and here's the big inconvenient truth that I want to challenge Ms. Davis and Ms. Krop to answer. We support producing our own energy here and moving it via pipeline to our refineries here in California and using it here in California, plain, simple, and safe. And I want to pause for a moment. I don't know if you picked up the Yes on Measure P sheet out there. Well, I got it a couple of weeks ago and I looked at it. It's appalling. They say here, it wastes millions of gallons of precious water we need for our homes and farms. Just not true. Most of the water, almost virtually all of the water that we use, is either reconditioned ancient seawater that we produce, 8 to 10 barrels of it, where every barrel of oil we produce, that's been trapped down there for millions of years. We recondition it, reuse it. Reduce, reuse, recycle. You've heard that mantra? We're actually doing it. We're just not talking about it. Our reclaimed water, I hear them spinning this thing about reclaimed water that we can get it to a point for uses. Yeah, those uses are there. But what about getting our energy out of the ground with it in the most safe and environmentally sensitive way instead of importing all those barrels? Isn't that a good use of that water? Another point. Generates massive air pollution and carbon emissions. You talk about it's dirty oil. For years around here, people have been saying, oh, it's just good for asphalt, that's all. That's just incorrect. But I ask the question, don't we all drive on asphalt? So what's wrong with that? The point is the refinery right up the road here, it does have an asphalt plant. It does make some asphalt. The technology has evolved way beyond that. The rest of the oil is shipped up to the Bay Area where it's refined into gasoline and all of the other important products we need here in California. It'll make climate change worse and increase our dependence on fossil fuels. I think Ms. Davis was posed with the question one time that if we could show her that the oil that's produced here is less carbon intensive as the oil that's being imported, would she support that? And she said yes. Well, she was shown that, and we have yet to hear anything from her. And I'll give you the specifics on that. Carbon intensity is how they measure the amount of carbon in the oil, the state of California. The average carbon intensity of the oil coming in, only 30 seconds? Oh boy. All right, I'm gonna have to catch some of this on rebuttal. Here are the facts, the inconvenient truths about this. It is damaging to Santa Barbara County workers, families, and taxpayers. It is deceptive. And getting back to this existing thing, I do want to catch that real point. Think of it this way. No, they're not outlawing existing production, but they're outlawing the things we need to do to keep our wells. They're outlawing the processes. So it's just like saying you're outlawing tires, but you're not banning cars and trucks. Just tires. It's that simple. The initiative explicitly bans the processes we use to keep our wells going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, we will take about a 10-minute break. We ask that if you have questions, you write them on one of these cards and bring them up. Thank you very much.
Right.